Okay, tonight is the 25th of July, and this is the 10th night we are speaking on the Dīgha Nikāya suttas. Tonight we come to an important sutta on dependent origination called the Mahanidana Sutta, Sutta number 15, Mahanidana Sutta. Thus have I heard. Once the Lord was staying among the Kurus. There is a market town there called Kammasadhamma, and the Venerable Ananda came to the Lord, saluted him, sat down to one side and said, "It is wonderful, Lord, it is marvelous how profound this dependent origination is, and how profound it appears, and yet it appears to me as clear as clear." And the Buddha said, "Do not say that, Ananda, do not say that. This dependent origination is profound and appears profound. It is through not understanding, not penetrating this Dhamma, that this generation has become like a tangled ball of string, covered as with a blight, tangled like coarse grass, unable to pass beyond states of woe, the ill destiny, ruin, and the round of births and deaths." Stop here for a moment. So here, Venerable Ananda at that time was supposed to be a Sotapanna, and he says dependent origination is supposed to be profound, and yet it appears to him as clear as daylight. But the Buddha said, "Don't say that." The Buddha said, "Origination is profound and appears profound." Why does the Buddha say it is profound? Actually, in the suttas we find that even before enlightenment, the Buddha said he considered what is the cause of suffering. What is the cause of suffering means basically what's the cause of being born, aging, sickening and dying. And when he considered like that, then he worked backwards. Then he realized the cause was being born, because it's the nature of the world. Once you are born into the world is a world of impermanence. Everything must change. So you will grow old and become sick and die. Similarly, he asked, what is the cause of birth? So he retraced the steps, and he understood basically dependent origination, like what Venerable Ananda understands. But to really understand dependent origination, we find in the Vinaya books, after the Buddha was enlightened, he spent the whole night contemplating dependent origination, how dependent origination arises and how it ceases, and how it arises and ceases. So he spent 12 hours the whole night, from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. Contemplating dependent origination. And during that time, he used his psychic powers probably to look at how beings arise and all these things. So having contemplated for 12 hours, then he understood that dependent origination is profound. But even if you have a basic understanding of dependent origination, like Venerable Ananda, you can be a Sotapanna, an Arya. And the Buddha continued, "If Ananda, you are asked, has aging and death a condition for its existence? You should answer yes. If asked, what conditions aging and death? You should answer, aging and death is conditioned by birth. What conditions birth? Being or becoming or existence conditions birth. Clinging conditions being. Craving conditions clinging or attachment. Feeling conditions craving. Contact conditions feeling. Mentality and materiality, nama-rupa, conditions contact. Consciousness conditions mentality and materiality. If asked, has consciousness a condition for its existence? You should answer yes. If asked, what conditions consciousness? You should answer, Mentality and materiality conditions consciousness. Thus, Ananda, mentality and materiality conditions consciousness, and consciousness conditions mentality and materiality. Mentality and materiality conditions contact. Contact conditions feeling. Feeling conditions craving. Craving conditions clinging or attachment. Clinging conditions being or existence or becoming. Being conditions birth. Birth conditions aging and death. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and distress. Thus this whole mass of suffering comes into existence. Stop here for a moment. So here you see the Buddha talks about 10 links of dependent origination of suffering. Normally you find in other suttas the Buddha talks about 12 links. But here you find the Buddha talks about 10. The two links that are left out here is sankhara, volition, and avijja, ignorance. So you have 10 here. Normally we chant on dependent origination. Avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññānaṁ, viññāna paccaya nāma-rūpaṁ, nāma-rūpa paccaya salayatanaṁ, salayatana paccaya paso, etc. So it looks as there's only 9, not 10. Even the salayatana, the six sense bases, are not here. So it looks like you can consider this dependent origination of suffering by these 9 links instead of 12. Further on. Okay, we continue and see. I have said birth, conditions, aging and death, and this is the way that should be understood. If Ananda, there were no birth at all, anywhere, of anybody or anything, of devas to the deva state, of gandhabas, of yakhas, of ghosts, of humans, of quadrupeds, of birds, of reptiles to the reptile state, if there were absolutely no birth at all of all these beings, then with the absence of all birth, the cessation of birth, could aging and death appear? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for aging and death, namely birth. I have said, being conditions birth. If there were absolutely no being or existence in the world of sense desires, of form, or the formless world, could birth appear? No, Lord. Therefore, just this is the condition of birth, namely being. Clinging conditions being. If there were absolutely no clinging, sensuous clinging, clinging to views, to rules and rituals, to identity view, could being appear? Craving conditions clinging. If there were absolutely no craving for sight, sound, smells, taste, tangibles, mind, objects, could clinging appear? Feeling conditions craving. If there were absolutely no feeling, feeling born of eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact, in the absence of all feeling, with the cessation of feeling, could craving appear? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for craving, namely feeling. And so, Ananda, feeling conditions craving, craving conditions seeking, seeking conditions acquisition, acquisition conditions decision making, decision making conditions lustful desire, lustful desire conditions attachment, attachment conditions appropriation, appropriation conditions avarice, avarice conditions guarding of possessions. And because of the guarding of possessions, there arise the taking up of stick and sword, quarrels, disputes, arguments, strife, abuse, lying, and other unskilled states. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha makes us understand how by logical thinking he could untangle these conditions of dependent origination of suffering. And then, so at the bottom the Buddha says, feeling conditions craving, craving conditions seeking, seeking is pariyesana, and seeking conditions acquisition, labha, acquisition conditions decision making, vinicaya, decision making conditions lustful desire, chandaraga, lustful desire conditions attachment, ajosana, attachment conditions appropriation, parigaha, appropriation conditions avarice, macharya, avarice conditions guarding of possessions, arakha. So because of that, to protect your possessions, then you take up the stick and sword, and quarrels and disputes, arguments, strife, abuse, lying, and other unskillful states arise. I have said, all these evil, unskilled states arise because of the guarding of possessions. For if there were absolutely no guarding of possessions, would there be the taking up of stick or sword, quarrels, disputes, etc.? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, the guarding of possessions is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for all these evil, unskilled states. I have said, avarice conditions the guarding of possessions, etc. Appropriation conditions avarice. Attachment conditions appropriation. Lustful desire conditions attachment. Decision-making conditions lustful desire. Acquisition conditions decision-making. Seeking conditions acquisition. I have said, craving conditions seeking. If there were no craving, would there be any seeking? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, craving is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for all seeking. Thus these two things become united in one by feeling. Stop here for a moment. How do these two things become united in one by feeling? Because of feeling, craving arises. And because of craving, why craving arises? Because of pleasant feeling. Feeling here refers to pleasant feeling. When you have unpleasant feeling, then you feel repulse, aversion. But when you have pleasant feeling, whether because of sights or sounds or smells or taste or touch or thoughts, then there is a tendency to crave for it, to want it again and again. And that condition seeking, etc. I have said, contact conditions feeling. Therefore, contact is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for feeling. Mentality and materiality conditions contact. But whatever properties, features, signs or indications the mind factor is conceived of, this is mind factor is Nikāya or mentality body, you can see. The mentality body is conceived of. Would there, in the absence of such properties, features, signs or indications pertaining to the mentality body, would there manifest any grasping at the idea of the materiality body? No, Lord. Or in the absence of any such properties, features, signs or indications pertaining to the materiality body, would there be any grasping at sensory reaction on the part of the mentality body? No, Lord. Stop here for a moment. The mind had this conceived of. So here is saying whether it is the mentality body, that means a mental factor, something occurring in the mind, or the materiality body outside. Outside means materiality body can refer to form, can refer to sounds. Sounds also is part of the materiality, and smells, taste, and touch. So these five senses refers to the rupa kaya. So whether it's because of pleasant forms or sound, sight, smells, taste, touch, and the mental part, anything in the thoughts, then would there be any grasping? Then because the sensory reaction here occurs when a sense object impinges on the sense base, meaning form or sound or sights or smells, taste, touch, impinges on the sense base, the eye, ear, nose, etc. So, by whatever properties the materiality body and the mentality body are designated, in their absence, is there manifested any grasping at the idea or at sensory reaction? No, Lord. By whatever properties, features, signs, or indications the mentality body is conceived of, in the absence of these, is there any contact to be found? No, Lord. Then Ananda, just this, namely mentality and materiality, is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition for all contact. I have said consciousness conditions mentality and materiality. If consciousness were not to come into the mother's womb, would mentality and materiality develop there? No, Lord. Or if consciousness having entered the mother's womb were to be deflected, would mentality and materiality come to birth in this life? No, Lord. And if the consciousness of such a tender young being, boy or girl, were thus cut off, would mentality and materiality grow, develop and mature? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this, namely consciousness, is the root, the cause, the origin, the condition of mentality and materiality. Stop here for a moment. For a fetus in the mother's womb to grow, consciousness must come into it. In other words, the being to be born goes into the womb, and the egg, this consciousness develops in that egg, that fetus, and then from there the mentality and materiality of that fetus will grow. So the other thing you must bear in mind is mentality and materiality and consciousness are counterpart. They always come together and they cease together. When there is consciousness, mentality and materiality must be present. And when there's no consciousness, there's no mentality and materiality. Mentality and materiality are the objects of consciousness, so must always come together with consciousness. I have said mentality and materiality conditions consciousness. If consciousness did not find a resting place in mentality and materiality, would there subsequently be an arising and coming to be of birth, aging, death and suffering? No, Lord. Therefore, Ananda, just this, namely mentality and materiality, is the root, the cause, the condition of consciousness. Thus far then, Ananda, we can trace birth and decay, death and falling into other states and being reborn. Thus far extends the way of designation of concepts. Thus far is the sphere of understanding. Thus far the round goes as far as can be discerned in this life, namely to mentality and materiality together with consciousness. In what ways, Ananda, do people explain the nature of the self? Some declare the self to be material and limited, saying, myself is material and limited. Some declare it to be material and unlimited. Some declare it to be immaterial and limited. Some declare it to be immaterial and unlimited, saying, myself is immaterial and unlimited. Whoever declares the self to be material and limited considers it to be so either now or in the next world, thinking, though it is not so now, I shall acquire it there. That being so, that is all we need say about the view that the self is material and limited. And the same applies to the other theories. So much Ananda for those who proffer an explanation of the self. How is it with those who do not explain the nature of the self, etc., etc., as in verses 23 and 24, but negated? In what ways, Ananda, do people regard the self? They equate the self with feeling. Feeling is myself, or feeling is not myself. Myself is impercipient. Feeling is not myself, but myself is not impercipient. It is of a nature to feel. Now, Ananda, one who says feeling is myself should be told, there are three kinds of feeling, friend: pleasant, painful, and neutral. Which of the three do you consider to be yourself? When a pleasant feeling is felt, no painful or neutral feeling is felt, but only pleasant feeling. When a painful feeling is felt, no pleasant or neutral feeling is felt, but only painful feeling. And when a neutral feeling is felt, no pleasant or painful feeling is felt, only neutral feeling. Pleasant feeling is impermanent, conditioned, dependently arisen, bound to decay, to vanish, to fade away, to cease. So too are painful feeling and neutral feeling. So anyone who on experiencing a pleasant feeling thinks, this is myself, must at the cessation of that pleasant feeling think, myself has gone. And the same with painful and neutral feelings. Thus whoever thinks, feeling is myself, is contemplating something in this present life that is impermanent, a mixture of happiness and unhappiness, subject to arising and passing away. Therefore, it is not fitting to maintain feeling is myself. Stop here for a moment. This self, atta, refers to something that is there all the time. If it appears and disappears, it cannot be the self. The concept of the self, or the Indian concept of the self, is something that is permanent and which you can identify as myself, and it's always there. If you say feeling is yourself, one moment feeling is there, another moment feeling is not there. Then when feeling has disappeared, then where is yourself? You must remember this is the concept of the self. So when the Buddha talks about anatta, no self, and talks about emptiness, sunyata, it does not mean that there is nothing. What it means is that there is nothing permanent. If there's something permanent, then you can identify that with yourself. But because there is nothing in the world that is permanent, so there's nothing in the world that is self. But anyone who says, feeling is not myself, myself is impercipient, should be asked, if, friend, no feelings at all were to be experienced, would there be the thought, I am? To which he would have to reply, no, Lord. Therefore, it is not fitting to maintain, feeling is not myself, myself is impercipient. Or anyone who says, feeling is not myself, but myself is not impercipient, myself is of a nature to feel, should be asked, well, friend, if all feelings absolutely and totally ceased, could there be the thought, I am this, as I am this feeling? To which he would have to reply, no, Lord. Therefore, it is not fitting to maintain, feeling is not myself, but myself is not impercipient, myself is of a nature to feel. From the time, Ananda, when a monk no longer regards feeling as the self, or the self as being impercipient, or as being percipient and of a nature to feel, by not so regarding, he clings to nothing in the world. Not clinging, he is not excited by anything, and not being excited, he gains personal liberation, and he knows birth is finished, the holy life has been led. Done was what had to be done, there is nothing more here. So stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that some people say they have feeling, but if they have feeling, then when the feeling has disappeared, then where is the self gone? Or if he says there is no feeling, so the Buddha says, if you say there is no feeling, how come you have a self? So if he understands that feeling is not the self, but the self has a nature to feel, but that is by not regarding the feeling to be the self, then he does not cling to feeling. Feeling is the cause of clinging, because when pleasant feelings arise, it's only because we identify ourselves with feelings that we attach to feelings. So when pleasant feeling arises, we tend to crave for it and want it again and again. And craving gives rise to attachment, which gives rise to being. But if we recognize that feeling is not the self, or belonging to the self, that feeling is impermanent, and whatever feelings arise, we don't attach to it. And if we don't attach to feelings, then there's nothing in the world we attach to, because all the things in the world that we attach to is basically because it gives us pleasant feeling. So when you are not attached to anything, then you are not excited by anything. Then only the mind is equanimous, then you can attain liberation. And if anyone were to say to a monk whose mind was thus freed that Tathagata exists after death, that would be seen by him as a wrong opinion and unfitting. Likewise, the Tathagata does not exist. Both exist and does not exist. Neither exists nor does not exist after death. Why so? As far, Ananda, as designation and the range of designation reaches, as far as language and the range of language reaches, as far as concepts and the range of concepts reaches, as far as understanding and the range of understanding reaches, as far as the cycle reaches and revolves, that monk is liberated from all that by the higher knowledges, super knowledge is abhinya. And to maintain that such a liberated monk does not know and see would be a wrong view and incorrect. So as we mentioned before, when a monk knows and sees, then he does not have opinions, because he knows. Ananda, there are 7 stations of consciousness and 2 realms. Which are the 7? There are beings different in body and different in perception, such as human beings, some devas and some in states of woe. That is the first station of consciousness. There are beings different in body and alike in perception, such as the devas of Brahma's retinue, born there on account of having attained the first jhana. That is the second station. There are beings alike in body and different in perception, such as the Abhasara devas. That is the third station. There are beings alike in body and alike in perception, such as the Subhakina devas. That is the fourth station. There are beings who have completely transcended all perception of matter by the vanishing of the perception of sense reactions and by non-attention to the perception of variety, thinking space is infinite. They have attained to the sphere of infinite space. That is the fifth station. There are beings who, by transcending the sphere of infinite space, thinking consciousness is infinite, have attained to the sphere of infinite consciousness. That is the sixth station. There are beings who, having transcended the sphere of infinite consciousness, thinking there is no thing, have attained the sphere of no-thingness. That is the seventh station. The 2 realms are the realm of unconscious beings, and secondly, the realm of neither perception nor non-perception. Now, Ananda, as regards this first station of consciousness, with difference of body and difference of perception, as in the case of human beings and so on, if anyone were to understand its origin, its cessation, its attraction and its peril, and the deliverance from it, would it be fitting for him to take pleasure in it? No, Lord. And as regards the other stations and the 2 spheres likewise, no, Lord. Ananda, insofar as a monk, having known as they really are, these 7 stations of consciousness and these 2 spheres, their origin and cessation, their attraction and peril, is freed without attachment, that monk, Ananda, is called one who is liberated by wisdom. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha talking about 7 stations of consciousness. First one is different in body and different in perception. Second is different in body and alike in perception. Third is alike in body and different in perception. The fourth is alike in body and alike in perception. The fifth is attained to the sphere of infinite space. The sixth is attained to the sphere of infinite consciousness. Seven is attained to the sphere of no-thingness. And then the two realms are realm of unconscious beings and neither perception nor non-perception. There are, Ananda, these 8 liberations. What are they? Possessing form, one sees forms. That is the first liberation. Not perceiving material forms in oneself. One sees them outside. This is the second liberation. 3. Thinking it is beautiful. One becomes intent on it. That is the third. 4. By completely transcending all perceptions of matter, by the vanishing of the perception of sense reactions and by non-attention to the perception of variety, thinking space is infinite. One enters and abides in the sphere of infinite space. That is the fourth. 5. By transcending the sphere of infinite space, thinking consciousness is infinite, one enters and abides in the sphere of infinite consciousness. That is the fifth. 6. By transcending the sphere of infinite consciousness, thinking there is no thing, one enters and abides in the sphere of no-thingness. That is the sixth. By transcending the 7. By transcending the sphere of no-thingness, one reaches and abides in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. That is the 7th. 8. By transcending the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, one enters and abides in the cessation of perception and feeling. That is the 8th liberation. Ananda, when once among attains these 8 liberations in forward order, in reverse order, and in forward and reverse order, entering them and emerging from them, as and when and for as long as he wishes, and has gained by his own super knowledge here and now, both the destruction of the asavas and the uncorrupted liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom, that monk is called both ways liberated. And Ananda, there is no other way of both ways liberation that is more excellent or perfect than this. Thus the Lord spoke, and the Venerable Ananda rejoiced and was delighted by his words. So these 8 liberations refers to these 8 things. 1, seeing forms. Number 2, sees forms outside. The third one is meditation on the beautiful, like a beautiful color. And then the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th refers to the arupas or arupa jhanas. And the 8th refers to cessation of perception and feeling. So sometimes there are some arahants, they have not attained the 8 liberations. And the later books, they say that those arahants are wisdom liberated, and that they, if they have not attained the 8 liberations, it means they have not attained any jhana. But that is not true, because here there's no mention of the 4 rupa jhanas, the 4 form jhanas. So it only mentions the 4 formless jhanas and cessation. And the first 3 refers to seeing forms. And this might be referring to seeing forms inside. Then the second one refers to seeing forms outside. And the third one is meditation on the beautiful object, like a beautiful color. So there's nothing here about the rupa jhanas. There are some monks who attain the 4 rupa jhanas and become liberated. But they have no psychic power. So because they have no psychic powers, they don't have the first liberation. They don't see forms inside. They don't have the second, see forms outside. And they don't meditate on a beautiful color or something like that, because they might be meditating on their breath. And also all the others, they don't have the 4 arupas or rupa jhanas, and they also don't have cessation of perception and feeling. And yet, because they have the 4 jhanas, they can become an arahant. So it is a misconception to think if a person has not attained the 8 liberations, that he does not have the 4 rupa jhanas. So now I want to come back to the explanation of the links of dependent origination. Actually, the links of dependent origination in other suttas, especially the Nidāna Samyutta of the Samyutta Nikāya, there are many suttas there concerning dependent origination, and later books like the Abhidhamma and the commentaries, they talk about dependent origination of suffering in terms of 3 lifetimes. And I think that is wrong, because when they talk about 3 lifetimes, they talk about the first 2, namely ignorance, which conditions sankhara. They say that because of ignorance in the past life, in your past life, sankhara, they say, is creating karma. So because of creating karma, and then the third link is consciousness. So in this life, you are born, they say. And then once you are born, then you have mentality, materiality, then you have 6 sense bases, and then you have contact at the 6 sense basis, then you have feelings, and then you have feelings condition craving, and craving conditions attachment, and attachment conditions becoming. So they say after that you have birth in the future life. So they talk about 3 lifetimes, but it's not necessary, because when they explain like this, in terms of 3 lifetimes, they talk about the rebirth consciousness and the dying consciousness, the last consciousness, and then the relinking consciousness. But then that gives the impression as though consciousness is continuous for your lifetime. Actually, in the Buddha's teachings, consciousness is arising and passing away extremely fast. Nothing is faster than the arising and passing away of consciousness. So in 1 second, you might have, I don't know how many times consciousness arises and passes away, but extremely a great number of times, maybe hundreds of times or thousands of times, even in 1 second. So because it arises and passes away so fast, we think it's continuous. It gives us the impression, for example, you see something, you think it's there all the time, but actually your consciousness sees and then dies away. And then you might hear a sound, and then your seeing consciousness arises and passes away, and then arises again and passes away. So you think you're seeing all the time, but actually it's not. So this we don't need to talk about the past life. We don't need to talk about future life. It is enough to see dependent origination in 1 lifetime. And so here, this Mahanidana Sutta, you find they don't talk about ignorance in the past life. They don't talk about creating karma in the past life. So that is already eliminated the past already. So actually, it is because of, if you talk in terms of 1 lifetime and you use 12 links, it's because of ignorance in this present lifetime that we have sankhara. Ignorance refers to ignorance of the Dhamma, ignorance of suffering, ignorance of impermanence in the world, ignorance of non-self or no self. So because of ignorance, in ignorance conditions sankhara, which is volition. Volition is the will to live, basically. And in dependent origination, sankhara, there are 3 sankharas under sankhara: kaya sankhara, vaci sankhara, and citta sankhara. But there is another set of sankhara in the suttas. It's almost similar. It is kaya sankhara, vaci sankhara, and mano sankhara. When you have mano sankhara, then it is a creation of karma. There are certain suttas in the 5 Nikāyas, you find when they talk about one set of sankharas and when they talk about the other set. So this set concerning dependent origination, the body sankhara, verbal sankhara, and mental sankhara refers independent origination. They always talk about kaya sankhara, vachi sankhara, and chitta sankhara. This refers to the will to live. Because of the will to live, because of the will to function, sankhara is basically volition. Because we want to function, we want to exist through the body, through the speech, and through the mind. So we have these 3 sankharas. Because of body sankhara, we want to function or live or exist by body. So we breathe. So kaya sankhara refers to breathing. And then vachi sankhara refers to thinking. Because you must have thought first before you can break into speech. So if you want to speak, first you must think. So that's why vachi sankhara is thinking. And then chitta sankhara is feeling and perception. The mind must start working first. Then only your mind can exist. So it is not like the other one. The other one is mano, is referring to this creation of karma. So because of the will to live, sankhara conditions consciousness. Here we have consciousness. Consciousness refers to the consciousness of a being. And once you have consciousness, then you have the object of consciousness, the counterpart of consciousness, which is nama-rupa, mentality and materiality. And because of these two, you also have the 6 sense bases, because consciousness must lodge itself in the body with the 6 sense bases. So the 6 sense bases come next. And then because of the 6 sense bases, you have contact at the 6 sense bases, bhasa. And then contact at the 6 sense bases gives rise to feeling. And when you have unpleasant feeling, you think you are suffering. When you have pleasant feeling, you think you are enjoying life. So because we want to enjoy life, we keep chasing after pleasant feeling. So you find in the world, if you can market anything, you can sell anything which gives people pleasant feelings, people will buy. Whether it's through the sights or through the sounds or through the smells, taste, touch, people will buy. Even through the mind, like nowadays, people sell computer games. People play computer games just to amuse the mind. So forms means seeing beautiful forms. That's why everybody likes to make up, like to look attractive. And then sounds, like nowadays you have a lot of rock bands. We were just talking this just now with Kevin about Justin Bieber being very popular with the young girls. So if you can make nice sounds, people want. And then smells, people sell perfumes. And then taste, everybody wants to eat good food. And then touch, touch is basically sex and all these things. So because of pleasant feelings, craving arises. The Buddha says this sights, sound, smell, taste, and touch, which gives rise to pleasant feelings, there's always an underlying tendency to crave for it. You want it again and again. Once you experience something that gives you pleasant feeling, then when you don't have it, the memory makes you crave for it. Attach, that is called attachment. So craving gives rise to attachment. And because of attachment, being arises. This being, although he always talks about the sensual desire beings, form beings, and formless beings, it is the concept I am. Once you attach to something, that I arises. For example, a baby, when a baby is born, it does not have much of a notion of the self. But you give it something like ice cream or chocolate or something, and then he craves for it as a result, and as attached to it, then the self arises. So as we grow older, you find most people in the world, as you gather more and more property, more wealth and all that, the ego becomes bigger and bigger. So that is being the feeling that I exist, that I am. So this being, once you have the I am, then you realize you have been born into the world. That gives rise to birth. You just know that in this lifetime you had come into being. You were born from your mother's womb, although you did not don't remember, and yet you know that you were born. And then from birth, you identify yourself with the body, and then there is aging. As the body ages, you think I age. When the body becomes sick, you think I am sick. When the body dies, you think I die. And all the different types of suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, all this. So that is basically the 12 links of dependent origination. Here it does not explain very much. That's why I always say, one sutta, you cannot get much. You have to study many suttas to understand. That's why, to understand dependent origination, you have to study the many suttas in the Nidāna chapter of the Samyutta Nikāya. Just as to understand Satipatthana, you don't understand Satipatthana just by reading one Satipatthana sutta. You have to study the many suttas under the Satipatthana chapter of the Samyutta Nikāya. So I think that's all I want to say here for now. You probably have some questions we can discuss.
You said the six sense bases cross-breaking. How does one release himself from the six senses? How do you detach yourself from them?
You mean have no six senses? You cannot have no six senses.
But then won't there always be a craving for it then? Because one will always feel something, one will always see something.
Yes. So the trick is not to have no six senses, but to be very observant of the feelings that arise, and don't allow the feelings to carry you away. So if you understand that feelings are impermanent, that whatever pleasant feelings you feel, if you attach to it, there's a danger. The danger is that you attach to it, and when it goes away, because in this world everything is impermanent, it is only there for some time. So when it goes away, you're going to suffer. You're going to have a lot of grief. So if you're understanding that, understanding especially the impermanence of the world, then even when you enjoy something, you can enjoy, but not to be over-attached to it. Then you won't suffer. So these 12 links of dependent origination of suffering, we can only break the link at feeling. Only at feeling. You have to understand that feeling is the cause of all suffering.
I think we read from page 226 that there's a consciousness coming to the mother And I'm wondering, how about this conscious? Is there any Dhammavuddho of this, or it's just a conscious itself? But we heard that it cannot possible, it must have Dhammavuddho. Then what is the Dhammavuddho of this consciousness?
This consciousness, in the suttas, in the Majjhima Nikāya, the Buddha called it Gandhabba. Gandhabba. And in other later books, they call it intermediate body. It's a temporary body. And in Chinese books, they call it Zhongyin Shen. So there is a body, but it is a temporary body.
Does it belong to any of the 5 realms?
No, definitely not, because it exists for a very short time, so the Buddha does not classify it. But it's as real as any of the 5 realms. Sometimes I meet people who study the Abhidhamma, and their way of thinking is the Abhidhamma, and they cannot accept this. They say that is basically they say that it's a soul. It is a soul, but the soul in Buddhism and the soul in other religions like Christianity is different. In Buddhism, any being itself is impermanent. So even the soul also is impermanent. Right? So in the Abhidhamma books, their thinking is that when a being dies, the consciousness stops here, and then the consciousness starts somewhere else. There's nothing that travels from here to there. That's the Abhidhamma concept. But in the suttas, we find the Buddha says that if a being is to be reborn into the womb, then this being enters the womb. It's very different. Also, if a being is to be reborn in hell, in the suttas it says the hell beings come up and drag him down to hell. So what do they drag? He's not yet in hell. They drag that soul. That soul is an intermediate body. It goes down to hell. That's why, like in Chinese belief, this ngao tao ma min, gu tao bear bin, namely horse face and buffalo head. A lot of people don't believe in things they have not seen. For example, a lot of people don't believe in ghosts. A lot of people don't believe in tree spirits. But I have a supporter who says that a few days before the father passed away, as he was eating dinner, he saw the horse face and buffalo head waiting outside the main door. Let's end here.